Imagine a force so volatile that it forced the mighty Zeus and every Olympian deity to flee in absolute terror. Today, we bridge the gap between geomythology and ancient chaos to expose the primal reality of Typhon's shadow. Discover how massive seismic upheavals birthed a god of storm and fire that changed history forever. Welcome to the Conjuring Files. Welcome to our channel with a new file to explore, one that takes us far from the quiet chambers of ritual and into the smoking, trembling heart of the ancient Mediterranean. We are not here to retell a bedtime story about gods and monsters. We are here to excavate a geological nightmare that the Greeks encoded into flesh, fire, and fear. If you are ready to stare into the abyss of primordial chaos and understand the reality behind the myth, make sure you hit that subscribe button and ring the bell. The ground beneath us is already shifting. Let's begin. We have been fed a sanitized version of Typhon. Modern adaptations reduce him to a CGI beast, a manageable threat for a hero to slay, a creature of scale and spectacle. But strip away the Hollywood gloss and return to the source texts, and you will find something that does not belong in a realm of order. You will find cosmic horror. Hesiod did not describe a dragon. He described an ontological rupture. 100 dragon heads erupted from his shoulders, each one hissing with a voice that mimicked the sounds of the natural world, but twisted them into something profane. Some spoke with the roar of bulls, others with the shriek of lions, others with the barking of dogs. And in the center, a sound that defied classification, a sound that made the blood freeze in the veins of those who heard it. His eyes flashed fire, not the controlled flame of a hearth, but the wild, consuming fire of the earth's core. He was not a creature of flesh, he was a creature of entropy. When the Olympians saw him, they did not prepare for battle. They ran. Apollo fled. Hermes dropped his caduceus. Zeus himself, the king of the sky, the wielder of the thunderbolt, turned and fled to Egypt. This is not the behavior of warriors facing a rival. This is the behavior of organisms facing an extinction event. Typhon was not a monster to be fought. He was a force to be survived. He represented the absolute negation of structure, the moment when the sky collapses into the earth, when order dissolves into ash and screaming wind. The ancient poets did not invent him out of whimsy. They inherited him. They inherited him from survivors who stood on the shore and watched the horizon split open, who felt the ground liquefy beneath their feet, who heard the mountain itself begin to breathe. The terror in the text is not literary embellishment. It is trauma. It is the recorded panic of a civilization that looked into the face of geological annihilation and gave it a name. Typhon is not a myth. He is a memory of the earth turning against itself, of the crust fracturing, of the atmosphere choking on superheated gas and volcanic glass. To read Hesiod's description is not to read fantasy. It is to read a forensic report written in the language of dread. The 100 heads are not biological anatomy. They are the multiple vents of a caldera, each one spewing a different composition of gas and ash, each one creating a chorus of acoustic terror that disorients and paralyzes. The fire in the eyes is not supernatural illumination. It is the incandescent glow of magma breaching the surface, visible for miles in the darkness, casting long, dancing shadows that make the landscape itself appear alive and hostile. The fleeing gods are not cowardly deities. They are the personified institutions of a society, the pillars of culture and agriculture and law, scrambling for stability as the foundation cracks. This is the reality of Typhon. He is the embodiment of the uncontrollable. He is the moment when human agency ends and raw planetary force begins. And once you understand that, the myth stops being a story. It starts being a warning. A warning that has been echoing through the strata of the Mediterranean for millennia, waiting for us to listen, waiting for us to recognize the sound of the earth waking up. The silence that follows the roar is not peace. It is the calm before the next fracture, and the next fracture is always coming. We must transition from the page to the plate, from the poetry to the pyroclastic reality. The Aegean Sea is not a tranquil body of water. It is a tectonic battleground. Beneath the blue surface, the African plate is grinding beneath the Eurasian plate, subducting, melting, building pressure that has no outlet but violence. This is not a slow, gentle process. It is catastrophic, it is explosive, and it has been happening for tens of thousands of years. The ancient Greeks did not have seismographs. They did not have satellite imagery or thermal mapping. What they had was memory. Oral tradition, generations of survivors passing down the description of the day the sky turned black at noon. The day the sea retreated and then returned as a wall of water. The day the mountain tore itself apart and buried entire cities under meters of pumice and ash. This is geomythology. This is the process by which geological trauma is encoded into narrative to ensure it is never forgotten. Typhon is not a random invention. He is the personification of the volcanic arc that stretches from the Peloponnese to the coast of Asia Minor. He is the living memory of the Minoan eruption of Thera, an event so colossal it altered the climate of the entire hemisphere, triggered tsunamis that devastated coastal settlements, and plunged the region into years of ash-choked twilight. When the poets described Typhon's breath as a storm of fire and sulfur, they were not speaking metaphorically. They were describing the acidic rain, the superheated pyroclastic flows, the toxic gases that rolled across the landscape, killing everything in their path. The shifting roars of his 100 heads align perfectly with the documented acoustic phenomena of volcanic and seismic activity. When magma forces its way through fractured rock, it creates harmonic tremors. When pressurized gases escape through fissures, they produce low-frequency rumbling, hissing, and explosive pops that can travel for miles. To a pre-scientific population, these sounds are not geological. They are vocal. They are the earth speaking. And when that speech is violent, it is interpreted as a deity of unimaginable wrath. The ancient mind did not separate the physical from the spiritual. It integrated them. The mountain that smokes is alive. The fault line that trembles is breathing. Typhon is the synthesis of these observations. He is the cognitive bridge between the observable catastrophe and the human need to make sense of it. By giving the eruption a face, a voice, a motive, the survivors could process the trauma. They could warn their children. They could build rituals to appease the force. They could create a framework for survival. But beneath the mythological veneer lies a stark, unvarnished truth. The Mediterranean is one of the most geologically active regions on the planet. The same forces that birthed Typhon are still active today. The same vents are still pressurized. The memory is not dead. It is dormant, and dormant does not mean gone. It means waiting. Waiting for the pressure to exceed the threshold, waiting for the crust to fail, waiting for the ancient song to begin again. The geomythology of Typhon is not a relic of superstition. It is a survival manual written in the language of terror. It tells us that the Earth is not a passive stage. It is a forecast. We must dissect the anatomy of this tectonic god, not as a biological entity, but as a geological metaphor rendered in visceral, terrifying detail. When the ancient texts describe Typhon's lower body as coiled serpents, they are not describing reptilian biology. They are describing the flow of lava, the slow, inexorable advance of molten rock that snakes across the landscape, consuming everything in its path, leaving behind a crust of blackened, glassy obsidian. Obsidian is not just rock. It is volcanic glass, formed when felsic lava cools rapidly. It is sharp. It is brittle. It shatters into razor-edged fragments. The myths speak of Typhon's touch turning flesh to stone, of his presence leaving the land barren and sharp. This is not magical transmutation. This is the reality of a pyroclastic environment. The air fills with microscopic shards of volcanic glass. They cut the lungs. They flay the skin. They embed themselves in every surface, turning the world into a landscape of hidden blades. The coiled serpents are the lava tubes, the channels through which the Earth's blood flows, twisting and turning, building pressure, waiting to breach. When the texts describe his wings darkening the sky, they are describing the ash plume. A volcanic eruption does not just spew fire. It ejects millions of tons of pulverized rock and glass into the stratosphere. This ash blocks the sun. It plunges the region into an artificial night. It coats the crops, poisons the water, collapses roofs under its weight. The wings are not feathers. They are particulate matter. And then there is the pinning. The myth states that Zeus defeated Typhon by trapping him beneath Mount Etna. This is not a moral victory. This is an early scientific model for thermal activity. Etna is not a dormant mountain. It is one of the most active volcanoes on Earth. It rumbles constantly. It vents gas. It produces lava flows that reshape the coastline. The ancients observed this. They saw the mountain breathing fire and smoke. They felt the tremors. They concluded that the entity was not dead. It was imprisoned. And its imprisonment was the source of the ongoing activity. This is a remarkably accurate metaphor for a magma chamber. The mountain is the cap. The pressure is the struggle. The eruptions are the entity testing its bonds. The battle with Zeus is not a clash of good versus evil. It is a clash of atmospheric order versus subterranean chaos. Zeus represents the sky, the weather, the predictable cycles of rain and sun that allow agriculture and civilization to flourish. Typhon represents the deep earth, the unpredictable, the violent, the force that can wipe the slate clean in a matter of hours. Their battle is the eternal tension between the surface world and the interior world, between stability and entropy. The ancients did not see this as a theological abstract. They saw it in their daily lives. They planted fields on the slopes of volcanoes because the ash enriched the soil. They built cities near fault lines because the trade routes followed the coasts. They lived in the shadow of the monster because the monster provided fertility even as it threatened destruction. This is the duality of Typhon. He is not purely evil, he is purely powerful. He is the Earth's creative and destructive force fused into a single entity. And the pinning beneath Etna is not a permanent solution. It is a temporary equilibrium, a pressure valve. The myths acknowledge this. They speak of Typhon's ongoing struggle, his attempts to break free, his rumbling beneath the stone. This is not poetic license. This is volcanic monitoring. The ancients knew that the mountain was not stable. They built rituals, they made offerings, they told the stories not to banish the threat, but to acknowledge it, to respect it. The anatomy of Typhon is a map of volcanic hazard. The serpents are lava flows. The wings are ash clouds. The fire is magma. The pin is the crust. The struggle is the pressure cycle. To read the myth as biology is to miss the reality. To read it as geology is to understand the warning. The mountain is alive, the pressure is building, and the pin will not hold forever. We must confront the psychological fallout of this divine terror. When the texts describe the gods fleeing to Egypt, they are not describing a tactical retreat. They are describing cultural trauma. They are describing the collapse of a worldview. The Greek pantheon was not just a collection of deities, it was a framework for understanding reality. Zeus controlled the sky, Poseidon controlled the sea, Demeter controlled the harvest. Each god represented a pillar of stability. When Typhon emerged, these pillars shattered. The sky turned to ash, the sea turned to tsunami, the harvest turned to dust. The domains of the gods were invaded by a force that recognized no boundaries, respected no jurisdictions, answered to no laws. The retreat to Egypt is a metaphor for cultural displacement. When your environment collapses, when your gods prove powerless, you do not just lose your home, you lose your meaning. You become a refugee in your own land. The transformation of the pantheon into animal forms is not a whimsical detail. It is a desperate survival mechanism. When faced with an extinction-level event, higher cognition becomes a liability. Instinct takes over. You do not prey. You run, you hide, you burrow. You become the animal that knows how to survive the dark. The gods turning into animals is the mythological encoding of this regression. It is the recognition that in the face of absolute catastrophe, civilization is a fragile veneer. Beneath it lies the raw, panicked organism. The death of the old world is not a gentle transition. It is a violent pruning. The cities burn, the coastlines are reshaped. The populations are decimated, the knowledge is lost, the survivors are left with fragments, with oral traditions. And from this ash, a new hierarchy is born. The Olympians do not return as they were. They return changed. They return with a deeper understanding of their own vulnerability. They return with Typhon pinned, not dead. They return with the knowledge that order is not a permanent state. It is a temporary achievement. It must be maintained. This is the birth of a more resilient pantheon, one that acknowledges the shadow, one that incorporates the fear. The monster is not outside the system, it is the foundation of the system. The psychological fallout is not just ancient history, it is a mirror. It reflects how human societies process trauma. When disaster strikes, we do not just rebuild structures, we rebuild narratives. We create new myths, we assign new meanings, we transform our gods. We become animals to survive, and then we become humans again to remember. The retreat to Egypt, the animal transformations. These are not theological curiosities, they are psychological blueprints. They show us how the mind copes with the uncopyable, how culture adapts to the irreversible, how fear is metabolized into wisdom, and how the shadow of the storm giant is not just a geological threat, it is a psychological constant. Beneath the marble temples and the philosophical treatises, there is a trembling ground, there is a smoking mountain. There is a force that does not care about our achievements, and when it wakes, we will not be gods, we will be animals, scrambling, hiding, surviving, and then if we are lucky, remembering. We must contextualize this legacy in the modern era. Typhon is not a relic, he is a prototype. He is the ancient face of what we now call a supervolcano, what we now call a megathrust earthquake. what we now call an unavoidable natural disaster. The Campiflegrei caldera near Naples is showing signs of unrest. The ground is rising, the gas emissions are increasing, the seismic activity is escalating. Santorini, the site of the Thera eruption, is still active. Etna, Stromboli, Vesuvius, the entire Aegean volcanic arc is a live wire. The shadow of Typhon is not a metaphor, it is a geological reality. We have mapped the fault lines. We have monitored the pressure. We have modeled the scenarios. And the conclusion is the same as it was 3,000 years ago. The Earth is volatile. The pressure is building. The pin will not hold forever. Why do we continue to personify this destructive power? Why do we still talk about the Earth being angry? Because personification is how the human mind processes scale. We cannot comprehend megatons of force. We cannot comprehend cubic kilometers of ash. We cannot comprehend the statistical probability of extinction-level events. So we give it a face. We give it a voice. We give it a motive. Typhon is not a regression. He is a cognitive tool. He allows us to respect the force. He allows us to prepare for it. He allows us to pass the warning down through generations. The modern scientific community does not mock the myth. It validates it. The acoustic phenomena, the thermal activity, the pyroclastic flows, the ash clouds, the ground deformation, the gas emissions, all of it aligns perfectly with the ancient description. The poets were not guessing. They were observing. They were recording. They were warning. And the warning is still active. The Mediterranean fault lines are not sleeping. They are breathing. The magma chambers are not empty. They are pressurized. The crust is not stable. It is stressed. The shadow of Typhon still looms. Not as a monster of flesh and fire, but as a statistical certainty, as a geological timeline, as a reminder that civilization is a temporary arrangement on a volatile planet. We build our cities on the slopes. We plant our crops in the ash-enriched soil. We draw our power from the geothermal vents. We live in the shadow because the shadow provides. But the shadow also consumes. And when it consumes, it does not discriminate. It does not negotiate. It does not care about our technology. It follows the laws of physics. It follows the cycle of pressure and release. It follows the ancient rhythm that birthed the myth. The legacy of Typhon is not fear. It is awareness. It is the understanding that we are not the masters of the earth. We are its tenants. And the lease is subject to renewal. The chilling realization is not that the monster is coming. The chilling realization is that the monster never left. It is beneath our feet. It is waiting. And when it moves, we will not be fighting a god. We will be surviving a planet. Thank you for joining me. If you want to continue exploring the intersection of myth and geology, make sure to like and subscribe to the Conjuring Files. The truth is in the files. Do not ignore the rumble beneath your feet. Stay vigilant. Stay prepared.